All right. Hey, everybody. It's Jeff Lobb from SparkTank Media and another episode of Office Hours with Jeff. This is a special event. I'm excited to have you guys. I'm actually juggling a few things. We're going live on our webinar. All right. Hey, everybody. It's Jeff Lobb from SparkTank Media and another episode of Office Hours with Jeff. This is a special event. I'm excited to have you guys. I'm Facebook going social at the same time.
On our webinar. All right. Hey, everybody. It's Jeff Lobb.
Oh, man, there you go. Live and live. Okay, so live in live. We're trying to do two things, just for those who heard me go live on Facebook. We're live on the webinar version of this. Hopefully you can see and hear us clearly. We're live on Facebook as well as streaming, which we will share out later. So special event, reason being is it's not my normal Friday doing this, but I had the pleasure of spending time with Eric at Inman Connect, New York City. He travels a lot at the Inman's East Coast, West Coast. I will let him introduce himself, but I want to set this up and why it's special. We spent only 10 or 15 minutes on stage together, but the topic of social media and the addiction of social media, and he's going to talk about the really deep, geeky stuff, yet geeky, but I really want those who have a short attention span to really listen throughout, because Eric's going to get into some things that are going to absolutely boggle your mind, yet understand why these platforms are doing what they're doing. So on that note, I'm going to introduce Eric Bryn. I'm going to let him tell you more about what he does for a living, and we'll jump into our content. Eric, welcome.
All right. Hey, everyone. How's it going? Thanks, Jeff, for this opportunity. It's a fun subject. Specifically, this is what I'm teaching on at Loyola University Chicago as an adjunct professor. I also do strategic management consultancy, and I bring in these theories, these concepts into what I consult on. It could be anywhere from digital branding initiatives, digital design, software development, whatever it is. And I've been in the space for probably 15, 16 years. First worked at Leading RE, then I worked at Baird & Warner, then I worked at Boomtown, and I'm doing this. And so, I think it's an interesting background because I have a perspective from the network side, the brokerage side, and the software side. And so can look at all different angles as it applies. So whenever I make a recommendation, I do have in my mind the many conversations I had with agents at Baird & Warner saying, Eric, this is blah, right? Either work, not work, here's why. So it's always about trying to distill it and figure out how it's going to make a resonant effect. But nevertheless, this issue, if you just globally just take ourselves out of where we're at right now on this webinar and go to the broader issues and the conversations that are happening. I mean, Facebook's going through this concept, like how is our platform leveraged for ill or good? Google's having some conversations around this, right? Fake news, whatever the issue is, whatever side of the house you're on, this is a conversation that's occurring. Right. And so with that, we're right in the mix of it. And so, we know what consumers are doing. Yep. We know that they're posting on Instagram, perfect picture. We know they're using Snapchat as sort of a visual conversation because it disappears. There's less onerous pressure to be perfect on it. We know that we're trying to gain edge rank on Facebook by posting meaningful information so we don't have to boost posts. All that kind of stuff comes into effect, right? We know how they're doing it. Sort of just described it. Most of the time, it's directly right through, this digital device called a phone, which operates as a scrim, if you will, if you're a theater person, between me and the audience, okay? And so the issue, though, is why are we so involved in this? And so academics have been studying this as well as technologists for several years. And we'll focus today on a couple major issues, major aspects of this. The first is there's a neurobiological mechanism involved here. And that's really sort of a fancy way, meaning it's our brain. It's the chemistry, the way our cognition works, how our body reacts to stimuli. Then it's a structural thing. So it's actually how the internet has been structured, okay? And so to get right into it, right, our brain. So what's that?
I don't want to get in my brain. I know darn well what you're going to find in there.
Well, we can all say that. But, when we get into the brain, it's this idea of psychologists have been researching aspects of stimuli and reward for many, many years, right? 1920s, 30s, 40s, 50s. And we can start with, if anyone's gone through Psych 101 in college, B.F. Skinner, right? The idea of working with pigeons, or teaching pigeons how to play ping pong. So you have pigeon A and pigeon B playing a game of ping pong. And if you want to see this work, just go to YouTube, and search for B.F. Skinner pigeon ping pong, and you'll see the video, right? So you see pigeon A, pigeon B, and they're pecking a ping pong ball back and forth. When the ping pong ball falls, meaning pigeon A loses, a trap door opens and pigeon B gets to eat a bunch of food. Then the ping pong ball goes back in. If pigeon B loses, the trap door opens on pigeon A starts eating a bunch of food. And that's just this basic concept of stimulus and reward, okay? So that's what's going on basically within our minds and within the systems, the structures, and then what's going on in our mind. Yeah, Jeff.
Yeah. So when we talk about that stimulus of the ping pong ball, is this the reward system of a like or a comment on social, basically, or the hearts on Instagram? Is that reward we're talking about?
Right. And if I could magically create the chime right now to appear on everyone's phone who's listening live or will then watch the video recording of this, it would be very hard for us not to all go, oh, what happened? Right. We have been conditioned, I'm not going to say trained, but conditioned to look at the phone. I mean, we've all been in meetings where someone forgets to turn off their phone, and whether you have an Android or an iPhone, the chime goes off because of a text message or some social media interaction, and people they just naturally look at their phone. And so you've seen it happen, and then say, hey, can we all turn off our phone? Everyone does, and we get back to the meeting. So, yes.
This ties into, this is what I say to them, how long could you not look at your phone and get a notification?
Right.
So people it's the trigger. Okay, I'm with you.
Get itchy, they get fidgety, and that's something we'll talk about in the context of sort of client relations, okay?
Yep.
Further on. But this is the basic concept, okay?
Yep.
There's also, and that's sort of positive reward, right? Stimulus, reward, the positive way. There's also this concept of negative, okay? In the sense of, if you just go to Wikipedia and look up B.F. Skinner, you'll see the example they use. It's basically, if it's raining, what do? I pull out an umbrella. I put the umbrella on my head, over my head, and it stops the rain. And so there's a negative event. I create a situation where I stop that, and therefore I learn that behavior. Yep. The same thing happens with sort of dissonance, right? So in other words, if we all look at the kind of conversations we're having, we like to be involved in the conversations that we know and like and trust, and we push away conversations that seem to be nothing that we want to talk about at the moment. And really, we've seen that exacerbated over the last couple of years, and it's caused sort of a collective conversation within Silicon Valley and some of the other tech hubs of the world like Berlin, and starting in this area called the Center for Humane Technology, which was created by a guy who was a digital ethicist at Google, which culminated in the concept of time well spent that Mark Zuckerberg mentioned on I think an earnings call, but also in a couple conversations. And it's the idea of getting back to what is meaningful around social media. So there's been a recognition that in the guise to as the Center for Humane Technology puts it, in the guise for turning conversations into streaks like a la Snapchat, Instagram glorifying the perfect picture, Facebook segregating us into echo chambers, and YouTube autoplaying the next video within seconds.
Right. That's
been what they're calling exploiting or monetizing our attention. And so the idea is, his argument, the argument of the site is it's been set up to addict us. Now, without getting to the overall sort of negative side of things, this is what's going on, right? It's called the dopamine pathway. And what you have is you have a stimulus, you take this in, and when it's a positive association, dopamine's released. And it creates this association of positive feelings. And dopamine is known to be a very powerful sort of, drug, if you will, within the brain. And I will continue to act more and more to create this dopamine effect within my brain of positive feeling, positive emotions, and I will work very hard to push away anything that brings me down, meaning dissonance. And so this process has been exploited, if you will, within all these different platforms to be able to create sort of an addictive type thing that's either from the phone, from the text message, from social, from whatever. And it's this very powerful mechanism that B.F. Skinner essentially proved out in the 30s, 40s, and 50s to be true. And in fact, during World War II, again, you go to the Wikipedia page and find this. So, but the idea is in World War II, it said that he could train a pigeon. He trained a pigeon to peck a thing with 45,000 times or several thousand times within 45 minutes. And so, you know, it's a very powerful mechanism when you understand how it works and how to leverage it.
Yeah. Yes. So a couple of questions coming. Some are funny, actually. The people are engaging, and there was some are saying, is it actually telling me I'm actually watching this on Facebook right now? But the one question is dopamine. So dopamine is the same drug, and help me, I'm not in the science behind those. Same drug addiction of regular addiction. Is it alcohol, drugs, cigarettes?
So that gets into a thing called the net brain effect. Okay. And I'm just kicking over here because I have some detailed notes on this stuff. Okay. So just.
Yeah, no, while you're doing that, I mean, for those who, you know, find that this might get really scientific and geeky, understand, put this in perspective. We're going to ask some real estate questions too.
Right. Understand
why our consumers and why we are the magnet to this and what it's doing for us in the next 5 years of our world or 10 years of our life, where it's going. So net brain. Yeah.
So the net brain effect was basically, it was posited by a UK-based audience research firm and a psychologist, Dr. Let's see if I can pronounce his name correctly, Dr. Thomas Tamaro Premuzic from the University College of London, right? He posited in 2016, okay?
Yep.
And basically, it's this idea, what we're observing, increased levels of narcissism, poor attention span, fear of missing out, near continuous participation in internet-related activities is related to this dopamine effect, and where his research was focusing on to relate to this. Because remember, this is somewhat new and emerging territory, this idea of digital addiction, right? We can look to alcohol addiction, drug addiction, porn addiction, whatever you want to call it, okay? Any forms of addiction that psychologists and sociologists have been studying for years, he's now looking at that corpus of research and applying it to the internet, which is, in a large part, just now emerging. And the reason why is because researchers now have something that they've never really had before. Terabytes of human user behavior to look at. And now they can run experiments, live experiments, real-time experiments, regression type experiments, but they can look at this data to then prove out their hypotheses. And so my prediction is over the next 2, 3, 4, 5 years, we're going to see some very groundbreaking research, because really where you want to get the latest insights on these types of things, it's you have to look to the research databases of research institutions looking in their theses and doctoral studies initiatives, because this is where they're focusing. So the next round of PhD graduates are focusing on this issues right now, and they will then graduate into, you know, the broader society and apply their research.
So how is this going to impact our business in whether it be lead gen or real estate, or does this have a direct impact by having all this data? Is it being recycled into better targeting, or where does this turn into?
Okay, so before I answer that question, let's talk about this. So the zygotic effect or zygotic effect, however you want to pronounce it.
Zygotic, yeah.
Okay, so this has to do with in 1927, Bluma Zygarnik, she came up with a theory and proved it out that people remember uncompleted or interrupted tasks better than completed tasks. And she proved it out, and it's been a model. It was most recently talked about by a Wharton professor out of University of Pennsylvania, Adam Grant, and he talked about it from the concept of creativity and procrastination. Yeah, and it's a little bit outside of our conversation, but I'm telling you that this research that was done in the 20s, 30s, and 40s is now finding a reapplication in our modern age because they can now study things in a different way using this research. But the idea of uninterrupted tasks, I remember more and uncompleted tasks than I remember more than completed tasks. That has a direct impact on sort of relations, whether you're on the mortgage broker side, the mortgage side dealing with real estate agents, or real estate agents dealing with clients. Okay, and so
I want to repeat that again because I want to hear it one more time slower. Is we remember more of uncompleted tasks,
uncompleted and interrupted tasks.
We remember more.
Yes.
Than when we actually complete the task.
Yes.
Gotcha. I'm really trying to put that in perspective because I would have never guessed that. So interesting. So
but we're in the zone. So
okay.
So basically think of it in the zone. And to use sort of the example that drove this theory, she was with her doctoral professor, meaning this is when she was a doctoral student. And so she was getting her PhD, and they noticed this phenomenon. They're out to dinner talking about whatever they're talking about, philosophers and researchers to talk about over a dinner. Yep. And they would then ask a waiter or waitress to repeat back the order.
Yeah.
And if they asked the waiter or the waitress to repeat the order before the order was paid, with a fairly high degree of exactitude, could not only talk about the exact things that were ordered, but the actual sequence. Okay. As soon as they paid, it'd be like, well, I don't know. Basically. Okay.
Yeah.
And so when you look at the sort of these two things, net brain effect, which is sort of the addictive side of things that we're talking about, this sort of learned behavior that I was discussing, and this effect is a zygotic effect. You have a sort of not a perfect, but a very interesting way to look at what I would call sphere of influence, successful sphere of influence behavior on behalf of real estate agents, or great mortgage people are the same way. They're spheres as professionals, right?
Right.
So what does this mean? All right. So let's go. But let's take this out to I am an agent.
Yeah.
And I just had a call from either a person I know who's going to list. I've been working with her for a couple months. I know she's about ready to list. I've had a call or an email or a text, right? Some communication, I'll call it, from a prospective buyer or a current client or whatever, okay? So we're just going to keep within that framework. And they say, hey, Eric, I need you to get me this information, whatever this information is, by 3:45 today, okay? And you say, hey, Marjorie, no problem. I got it.
Yeah.
Then at 2:30, you get the email. Eric, are you working on that? I haven't heard from you. You're like, hold on, I told you the deadline's 3:45. In your mind, you're saying, I'm working. Why, what's going on here? Well, I'll tell you what's going on. It's learned behavior, okay? Because remember, there's a dopamine pathway that's going on. So let's just start at the top level. Social media. I have this idea of I need to be constantly engaged. I'm getting constant interaction. I'm getting constant feedback, right? I make a post, I get a like. I make a post, I get a share. I make a post, I don't get anything. What the heck happened there? Okay,
right.
Whatever. It's the whole point is I'm used to this constant feedback loop.
Right.
Then there's other things going on. So, what's one of the biggest acquisitions in online commerce right now? Amazon's acquisition of Whole Foods.
Yeah.
Immediately rolling it into, Amazon Pantry, Amazon Prime. Who responds? Costco, working inextricably with Instacart and all that kind of stuff to create sort of their version of it. And I'll use Costco as an example because that's what I use. Yep. A 3.5 hour purchase process gets turned into a simple three-way conversation, three points of conversation. Yep. Here it is. Hey, Eric, I'm Sally. I'm about ready to start your shopping experience at Costco. If I have any questions, I'm going to call you. Or if you have any questions for me or updates, just let me know. Is that okay? Yes. Text. Yes. Then, hey, Eric, I just finished your, hour later, 25, 30, 40 minutes later, whatever it is. Hey, Eric, I just finished your order at Costco. I'm on the way to your home, and I'll be there in 20, 30, 40, 50 minutes, whatever the traffic is, right? They can use Google Maps to figure that out. Then, hey, Eric, I'm outside your door. I'm ready. Are you ready to receive your order? In a 2.5 hour window, I've been communicated with 3 times.
Right.
Wow. So now, does that put the pressure on an agent saying, do I have to do that to everybody? No. You don't, because you need to think about a little bit of rationality here. But to your important clients, or to a client that has asked for a specific task, hey, Eric, it's 10 o'clock today, and at 3:45 I need something. Is it really that much harder to just ping your client one or two times to say, hey, I'm working on this, don't worry, I'll make the deadline? I would argue, if it's an important client, no, because it's just a text message or a simple ping back. What you're doing is you're not pandering to the client, you're satiating learned behavior. You're playing it in with this already existing construct that says, I feel confident and comfortable with who you are because I'm out of control of this process, and
Right.
you're letting me know that you're in control of it, and thus I'm in control of it, which creates a dopamine release, which makes me happy and trust you, which has a higher degree of referring you, which we'll get to in a second. I know you have another question.
I do, because here's where I think we have a big disconnect in real estate, loans, all this other stuff is we're getting this addiction trained behavior from the platforms that give us that effect.
Yes.
Yet when we send email, which we usually expect email to be a more timely process, like, hey, I'll get back to you. You send an email, maybe they get back to you tomorrow or the day after. We're waiting for that immediate response, or not immediate, but fairly quicker response. And this happened this weekend, even with me as an example, is I had a person had an issue with one of the products I have. I said, my team will look at it on Friday. It'll get back to you, soon, all day Saturday. I'm talking all day, text, phone calls.
Yep.
Question mark. I'm like, it's friggin' Saturday. My team's haven't even looked at it yet. Can you give me, please, 24 hours? Like, please. Right. But I think we're getting that impulse from the social behavior, and we're stuck in an email world that we're not used to it, and people are not wanting to wait.
Exactly.
Am I on there with that type of platform?
You are. And so what you're then getting into is the sociological disconnect, right?
Yeah,
so there's it's a psychologically driven thing, but now it's a sociological disconnect because, for better or for worse, they look to you as having the resources of Amazon.
Right.
Okay?
Yeah.
And you don't. So therefore, there should be, if we want to get, scientific about this, you could say, okay, I'm going to use this as a use case, right? We are all within, you are people within the general realm of product development and concepts within software, and rolling out product. It's this agile product. So what is the minimum viable product? And we're constantly testing our assumptions. So we could say, all right, that was a breakdown. Email versus, we're having this driven thing. We're doing, I don't care what it is. So therefore, I will do some multivariate testing here. I'm going to test a couple of responses. A total inform, overload. Here's my issues response. Here's the, hey, yes, we are awesome at what we do, but we don't have the resources of Amazon. So give us, this kind of time. I know it's important to you or whatever. I don't know. But the key is you can experiment with the proper balanced response to say what is the appropriate response in that type of a circumstance. I mean, that's how I look at it. Now, on the flip side, within platforms, and the only platform, there's a lot of lead gen platforms out there, but the one that I know best is Boomtown, and I can tell you that they hit on with some of this stuff. What they have this thing called through their app, they have a thing called an insights panel, and what it shows is it's based around consumer behavior. They're analyzing 42 different signals from consumers, and they're saying this person who registered on your site 327 days ago is now back on, and they've looked at this property, they've done this thing, they've done this, they've done this. I think that's important to you. Reach out to them. And so the reason why I'm bringing that up is only because it's the only lead gen platform I really know intimately, okay?
Sure.
But the idea is that it's a metaphor for platforms out there that communicate to you in smart ways to say, what's giving you the opportunity? Yes, you have 10,000, you have 1,000, 2,000 leads in your database. You can't, busy real estate professionals who are doing deals, 1 to 2 deals a month, they don't have time to communicate with 1,000 prospects on a yearly basis even. So what you need is who can I communicate with now with the information that's most meaningful to them and reach out to them in context, right? And so that would be sort of, from just analyzing any platform, how is that giving me that effect? The other thing is you can look at it, this sort of goes into the next section around structured versus unstructured, the structure of the internet. But, there's a lot of people out there saying, real estate agents saying, I'm getting a lot of direct leads right from Zillow's profile page.
Right.
You know, thank goodness I've been paying to get attention to my ratings over the last 5 to 6 to 7 to 8 years, or however long it's been up there, because people are consumers, again, in the on-demand sort of quick, they just don't want to search. They say, you know what, you have 55 reviews, you're at a 4.8 star rating, you seem like you know what you're doing, hey, can I just work with you? I mean, that happens quite a bit as well. And so you're looking at the power, and that's a recommender system, right, which we'll get into. But the idea of what we're dealing with, right, in terms of clients, you have to understand when they get like that, it's a taught behavior, it's a conditioned behavior. They get it in all aspects of their life, but that's also their digital behavior. They may not be that way in real life.
Real life, yeah.
They may not be with a blood to blood, belly to belly, but online, because they get it from everywhere, that is what is expected. And so, it's up to us to sort of play to that a little bit, because you're not pandering, you're just working in with already existing constructs of which to a certain degree you're out of control. So you can work towards that. So then on the sphere side, let's talk about how zygotic effect comes into play. Okay. So here we go. Yeah. This one, I think people feel free to push back whatever you want. But my view of this fits perfectly within Sphere, because we all know those Sphere agents that somehow they don't advertise per se. They may do a mail drop, or but they're not spending, $15 to $25 to $30,000 a year on Zillow or Realtor.com or whatever. They just have a healthy referral business from past clients.
Yeah.
My argument after reading about this is this. They do not look as a transaction as the end point. They don't look at it as the end goal. In other words, they do not look at, when I work with you, Jeff, to either sell you a home or help you buy, sell a home or help you buy a home, okay? I don't look at that as the end point. I don't move on to my next client. I look at that as simply one more task on a whole series of tasks and events that will complete when either of us decide to move on completely. Okay, so that means, at the end of 40 years of a successful real estate agent, I am now transitioning out, and I've given it to my son, my daughter, the business, this agent or whatever, we move on. Or you say, you know what, I'm moving to a new state or a city, or I'm just sort of done, I'm not going to sell ever again, whatever it is, right?
Yep.
But we all know these agents. And so my argument is that they do not look at as a transaction as the end point, because when that happens, what happens? Okay? I say, as a consumer, the transaction's over with. I go,
done. Next.
Done. That therefore gives a psychological reason for why we keep seeing this odd stat that keeps coming up, even in the age of all this hyper technology. 66% of both buyers and home sellers, as reported by NAR for nearly the last 20 years, which has remained unchanged, 66% use the real estate agent who contacts them first. Wow. Wow. Okay. I love my same stat. 95% report they love their real estate, but only, a third of them actually use the same real estate again. Again, right? Why is that? I think there's a lot of, we all know agents, many agents out there, they stop at the transaction, they're on to the next one. Let me give you a story, a parable, a story of two agents. One doing 21 to 24 deals a year, one doing 48 to 54 deals a year. Okay. One, I was just having a conversation with, saying, I know I really need to pay more attention to my past clients. I'm like, wow, right? It's a hunter-gatherer mode, new prospect, new thing, move up my price point, all that kind of stuff, right? Yep. Versus, and they've both been in the same area, the same sort of region of Chicago about the same time, okay?
Yep.
Then the other, who basically started at a $400,000 price point, is now knocking on $800, $900 million price points. And this whole thing is hardly ever advertises. She's great on social, okay, by the way, but only about what I love. I love this. I love listing. I love selling. Oh my God, a new happy client. Nothing, I don't think, not many paid posts, whatever, but inextricably linked within the client's lives. Inextricably linked within, yes, this condo that I sold you here, now you have a child. Let me know when you want to move to either a bigger condo, a townhouse, or out in the suburbs somewhere. I got connections all. consistent reinforcement, right?
Yeah.
Who is in that book of personal referrals? She's looking not as the transaction as the end point, meaning I've wiped my hands. Wow, that was a great transaction. This is all, I'm involved with you and your real estate aspirations, meaning in flow with you, over the next several years. And so I think the best book on that one is called Ninja Selling. Okay.
Yeah.
And I get nothing for this. This is just stuff that I see and I say, this is perfect. That was started by Larry Kendall I think over 40 years ago out of Colorado. Formed a company called the Group Real Estate Company. And it's reported by Real Trends to be the most, those agents are the most productive in the United States and have been for nearly, I think, at least 2 decades.
Yeah.
The whole point is, he talks about being in flow. Well, here is this idea of and when I started rereading the book in context to this research that I've, looking at, that's because the task is never complete. The way he talks about his tactics to go in and just be engaged and be normal and ask simple questions and be and actually express true interest in them, right? The lives of your clients. That's how you remain in flow. That's what he calls it. I just say, well, it's an uncompleted task. And that's why you're remembered. That's why you remember your clients too. Because guess what? There's a two-way process here. You have to, your clients, just as you position yourself as part of an uncompleted task for them in terms of home ownership and the lifestyle and aspirations that they have through real estate.
Yep.
You need to look at them as their life is also an uncompleted task for you. So you're consistently engaging with them on points of common interest. And so, we're seeing that out of a great real estate agent out of Denver. Her name is Moore Zucker. I think she works for Kentwood Real Estate.
I know Moore. I just saw Moore last week, a couple weeks ago.
Talk about a person who understands the power of digital and social, never panders, and is completely in sync and in flow with not only her clients, but the community of Denver. I mean, she is a pattern to follow, right?
Yeah, she's awesome. I got a good question here for you from Terry, and I'm glad she's asking this too, right? And this, before you move on to even anything else, and I'm just trying to juggle all this because I'm getting some good feedback here. So asking for your advice on creating more meaningful communications on social from an agent's perspective and a broker's. So should we placate the conditioned behavior, or should we take the lead somehow and create something more meaningful?
Okay.
I think most of us are placating and allowing people to take this time. So look for your.
So what do you mean by placating? So extrapolate a little bit.
I think what she's asking basically is, agents may not be the quickest to respond, may not adopt to it,
Yes.
may not want to do this. So as a brokerage mentality is like, what do I do with agents who just think this is okay? Do I interfere? Do I intercept? Do I help?
I think it's okay to not respond or something like that.
Yeah, and I also think it's the same thing from an email perspective too. You send an email and you eventually just wait. But I think what she's saying is how to create more meaningful communications.
Okay.
When you've got people conditioned for sitting and waiting.
So this is where systems come into play.
Right.
Okay. And your systems can be a human system.
Right. Or it could be a bot. Yep.
Or it could be a bot. So let's just go to OpCity. Okay.
Yep. Okay. Yeah.
OpCity out there, the lead qualification referral service.
Yep.
That is just sort of, doing great work out there.
Yeah.
In terms, and they have a human system along with exacerbated or helped along with I'm assuming, I don't know what their system is per se, a pretty probably kick butt technology system. But essentially, they're sitting out there and they have a human system in place qualifying these leads. They understand that when consumers come in and they have questions, they have to have that response. They also understand that brokerages and agents, specifically high-producing agents, which they target, can't always respond to that. So they have to have some form of help to get that done. So as a brokerage, it behooves you to look for these systems that allow you to have sort of the reasoned response and the touch point that makes sense, okay? Now, what does that mean? That means there's a lot of effort being put out there. If you just the latest round of Inman technology companies coming up, there's AI-enabled response. There's, I think, I can't remember what Riley, he launched Inman a couple of years ago.
You got chatbots that are automated. You've got, You got SMS that's automated. You've got some human interaction where you got humans responding.
Yes.
There's a couple variables, and I don't think anyone's really proven. Well, I guess you can argue that. I think there's some that are trying to prove whether the human touch or the automated touch quicker to respond is going to be the more cost-effective way to do it.
And so again, this goes into testing it.
Sure.
For your particular company, for your particular circumstance, a human touch, it might behoove you to either license a call center or to build one out yourself, because that's part of your brand and what you're doing. Or it could be better to have a first cut of bot-oriented responses or AI-enabled responses, a learning AI, so it can understand the colloquial nature of your location and the region and your brand and all that kind of stuff. And then, acceleration process to where a human can always engage. Okay. So
yeah.
Either one of those, you are, I guess, placating, but you're sort of satiating a learned behavior. You're playing into, and remember, the dopamine effect within a brain, it creates powerful associations. Everyone listening today, think about a positive event in your childhood past,
yep,
and then a negative, right? It has equal resonance because of that emotional connection. So what you're really doing in the case of sinking in with this sort of conditioned behavior is you're creating, hopefully, a situation where positive emotions are being associated with your brand as a brokerage, your brand as an agent, and thus creating a long-term connection with the client, right? You take our agent I was talking about earlier doing 48 to 54 deals a year. She has very positive connections with her clients. And when she makes a mistake, which is rare, but when she does, she owns up to it, okay?
Hold that thought 1 second though. People own up to it in person, but I know I don't know if you're gonna cover this now, if it's part of this effect you're talking about here, is what about the ones online? You used to talk about maybe having two presence, a personal and a digital.
Right.
What about the one that doesn't want to own up to it online, or doesn't want to deal with confrontation, or doesn't want to deal with making a mistake and then just push the block button and block you out because they don't want to deal with it, versus someone like we talk about our agent now, she will actually own up to it and show the human side of, hey, I made a mistake.
So I think the idea is, I have a statement I've been saying for many years around this idea of disruption. The consumer is the ultimate disruptor. Okay.
Yep.
So when we look to like technology disruption and this disruption, and I want to have a disruptive service, that's a very healthy debate. And of course it's meaningful, but I always just go back and maybe it's just, I'm punting the ball or something, but the consumer is the ultimate disruptor. And what will happen is that person will just be bypassed by the consumer and will go to somebody who responds and doesn't block and is willing to own up. This whole concept of transparency, not saying you go out there and you say, oh, wow, I really made a mistake there, and my E&O insurance is really glad that. No, you're not about that. It's about in a public way. You're not, out there with some self-flagellation going on, but it's about when there's a mistake, you own up with your client, right? You make good. How do you make good? Well, that's because you know your client so well, you do make good. And sometimes you can't, but for the most part, people respect that. But, the top professions out there, mistakes are few and far between because that's why they're in demand.
Right.
But
so tell me about the two different parts of, maybe a different presence of being in real person versus being online. Is there science behind that a bit?
So that gets into a little bit of this sort of the structural side of the internet. Okay. But it's essentially this. We have, well, again, this type of research has been going on for, about a decade, but it's really accelerating right now for a variety of different reasons. The first is ethics is really emerging as a very important conversation within technology firms, okay? And ethics is emerging as a very important conversation within the European Union, which is really leading the world in terms of giving consumers more and more power, if you will, over how their data is used. And so there's a lot of laws and regulations and conscriptions around how entities like Google and Facebook, et cetera, can use data. Okay.
Right. Yeah.
And so in the US, we're an open kimono. Okay. It is just, data is just, anyone wants for fun, just go to the Direct Marketing Association conference. It's held across the country. You can get a vendor's license for, just an exhibition license for fairly inexpensive, and just go talk to vendors slinging consumer data. It is an amazing amount of money around consumer data. But that's the US side, okay? EU side, different story. But essentially what's happening is you have this, from a philosophical or sort of an academic perspective, is you have, in a simple way, two types of identity. I have my in real life identity, meaning the personhood of whom I am, with blood-to-blood relations, family, networking, in-face communications, and then a digital identity that could be different. Some of them are aligned perfectly the same, right? But some of them have a disconnect because of certain things. And the simple way to look at this is this is a little bit outside of this exogenous versus endogenous preferences, but the simple way to look at it is, were you the same person today as you were in 8th grade, or when you graduated from high school, or if you went on to college when you graduated, and now you're 30 years in or 20 years into a career, right? The chances are your value structure may not have changed, but who you are and who you interact with changes. And that's been reset several times. Data-wise, that may not be true. So when you first decided to use Google back when it launched in its public beta, 97, I believe, maybe 96.
Yeah.
96, 97, took out Alta Vista, okay?
Yep.
And for anyone who doesn't know what that is, just go to a place called the Wayback Machine. I'll say it again, the Wayback Machine. And type in Alta Vista, and you'll see what you were
I remember.
time. And why Google was this magic thing.
Lycos.
With the enter box, and then you entered in and magic happens. But anyway, from that time, and then you entered in and got a Gmail address, Google has been tracking all your interactions through, they bought DoubleClick, so they know where you go, what you do after Google. If you're on YouTube, second largest search engine in the world, at least on not the world, but at least definitely in the US. I don't know if it's on the world anymore. You have China to account for in this case. But you have those types of things, and it has a single view of you as a data identity. And so what's happening, especially led by the European Union, is this idea of giving consumers control over that digital identity and what's known as a right to be forgotten.
Wow.
Meaning a petition to Google under certain circumstances, or to Facebook, or to, in some cases, Wikipedia even, to say, take this down. It's inaccurate of who I am, right? This thing that you had, that the search engine is demonstrating to the world that happened when I was 19, 20 years old, has no bearing on me as a working professional now when I'm 45, okay? Yeah. No one knows about it. I don't talk about this on my human-to-human, blood-to-blood, face-to-face type interaction, but now it's shown here, and what was taken up the European Union, the Commission, and it was decided that, yes, people have a right to be forgotten. So in certain circumstances, you can petition Google to take you out of the search engine.
So it just wipes it clean? Just
that aspect of things. Doesn't all clean, but there's certain, Google fought back pretty hard, and there's a certain process to get it done.
Sure.
You can reset, okay, under certain circumstances. So when you have that happen, and they basically just take out the offending URL, so it does not show up in their search engine. Okay?
Right. Yep.
Basically the concept. So, this relates to this exogenous versus endogenous preference, and it's a fancy academic term for basically consumer choice over media versus media's choice forcing consumer to make choice. Okay, so let me explain that, okay?
Sure.
So from an exogenous preference, it's basically like this. Social scientists suggest that media out there is like fruit waiting to be picked, okay?
Yep.
I go to Google, I search, and I say, oh, this choice is a different media that I can pick like fruit, okay? Or I have this thing from Google News, or I go to this news source, or you know what? I say I want to go to New York Times, Washington Post, all that kind of stuff, organically, meaning direct, without going through the scrim of Google News or something like that, all right? And so what happens is that its media is considered passive, right? So what we rely on to then help us with this is a whole concept of sort of recommender systems and all this kind of stuff to sort of help us vet, the best types of media. So you're going through, and its basic gist is consumers are driving the interaction. So on the flip side is sort of an endogenous preference, right? And what it basically is that in this case, the consumers are sort of passive, sort of flipping around. And there's two major models in there. And it's like this, it's this, where it's called the and this is going to be sort of a funny term, but dissonance attribution model of purchasing, where consumers act in a way to justify their decision, meaning creating positive feelings. So you can sort of think about that, the point of sale purchase, right? The big candy bar sitting there when I'm checking out and it's $5 and I say, I need it because it makes me feel good. Okay, so something like that.
Sure.
Then you have the choice-induced preference change model, which says that consumers are about negating dissonance. Okay, so what's happening is that you still have these recommender systems, but basically it's the system that's driving the interaction. Okay, so I surf from personalized recommendation to the next. So what happens is, if you think about, there's a great TED conference talk called The Filter Bubble. So just type in Eli Pariser, E-L-I, next word Pariser, P-A-R-I-S-E-R. And he's a researcher out of, I think, MIT. But he gave a talk in 2009 or 2011 called The Filter Bubble. And what he talks about is basically this ladder model, that it's an endogenous type preference, meaning that by virtue of my likes and my shares and my conversation with people, it filters out anything that would cause dissonance, meaning it filters out anything that I might want to see, but since I don't even know it's there, I don't know if I want to see it. And that's called the filter bubble. Okay.
Right.
So an easy way to think about this is Netflix. All right.
Yep.
So you have exogenous versus endogenous. When I first joined Netflix, I log in, and the first thing I do is, let's say I like cowboy movies. I like, Westerns. So I say, I'm absolutely going to see all the Clint Eastwood on there. So I see all his repertoire. And I move into Dirty Harry because it's sort of the same themology. I get presented with some other types of Westerns that are sort of more modern, but nothing, I don't like them. So I negate them.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden I'm starting to see different shows come in, like, say, what's that weird Norwegian show? Oh, I'll check it. Oh, that was awesome, even though the dubbing was horrible and the concept was not so tight, but it aligned with sort of what I was liking in a Western. Okay, which is sort of good versus evil, deep, simple way to present thematic, views of humanity, okay, whatever. And what's happening, and over time, is it the system that's driving my interaction, or am I driving the interaction? Is there, when I first entered in, the Westerns were more fruit waiting to be picked, but now the system is driving me that. And that gets into this whole idea of preference-driven or recommender systems or algorithmic-driven type systems. And a leading theory is out of Northwestern University. It's a professor there, and it's basically saying that where we're evolving to are these closed, unobtrusive structures. And what it means is sort of the same way that people input information, the system responds, and then the system starts making more recommendations. And I don't know now if that is based upon my true choice and preference, or it's the system who understands me to a certain degree and to a certain high level, that now I'm only presented with choices that are tautological or self-referential. So I get caught in sort of a filter trap. Well, closed unobtrusive structures are these whole concepts around predictive algorithms, AI-enabled neural networks, driving decisions. And the reason why this is important for us as mortgage and real estate professionals is because we have to remain cognizant that sometimes these systems can have bias. And so the author of, let me just search it up real quick. I think it's Kathy O'Neill, right? Kathy O'Neill, weapons.
Oh yeah, she got a book out. I think it's
So a Harvard researcher, she worked on Wall Street, did all this kind of stuff, and she wrote this book. Her name is Kathy O'Neill. It's called Weapons of Math Destruction. And it's called How Big Data Increases Inequality and Threatens Democracy. Okay, what she's talking about are recommender systems that are driven by algorithms, that are driven through systems that we don't know. They're unobtrusive. We don't know they're there. They're closed because we can't interrogate them.
Sure.
That it's driving so much of economy. So how do I know that out of 500 different mortgage products available to me as a potential homeowner or whomever, that the two that were recommended to me is not based around some bias that was inadvertently put into the algorithm based around because of where my socioeconomic status, my zip code, or whatever, right? So the reason why this is important, so just like modern researchers around sort of the dopamine effect, the idea of addiction and things like that related to modern technology are looking to the 20s, 30s, and 40s research and 50s research of 1900s. We can go back to the 1950s and 1960s and just look at fair housing, right? There was, starting in Chicago, the whole idea of open housing in the Fair Housing Act starting here. And what that means is we have to have that same type of exacting conversation around bias as they did in legislation and restrictive covenants and all that kind of stuff related to today's world of algorithms. The challenge is this, as we were discussing earlier, how do you interrogate an algorithm? You can't. Can't talk to an algorithm. I can talk to the developers, I can talk to the company, but oftentimes because of intellectual property and trade secrets, it's wrapped in a degree of secrecy. I mean, you could just see how much effort both Google and Uber put in around that issue getting to the LiDAR radar. And that was in camera reviews by the judge, meaning only the judge can look at it in terms of determining what's in, what's out, because it can't be open to the public, in a trial. So, this is what her concern is. And I think it's a legitimate concern as real estate professionals to remain cognizant of. Can we change it today? Very hard. I mean, can we spray pixie dust on it? But no, what we can do is we can work through organizations like RESO and things like that to say, as all this connection of systems starts to occur, and as this system over here starts feeding this system over here, and as we start satiating the needs of on-demand consumerism, meaning I want my perfect recommendation now, well, that means it's an AI-enabled system to derive that. Well, we need to make sure and contest it, that make sure it's not inherently biased in making it. Right? I mean, that would be the professorial side of me and sort of the ethical side of me coming out saying that. Because
how can we say that's ethical? How could that be ethical, though?
It's not ethical. I mean,
it's not ethical, right? It's not, because it could steer you to two choices that may not be the best for you, but basically the best of what that platform thought was best. Which, if we look at our future, we get into. I mean, I am not going to create this conversation here, but when we get into more electoral nominees and more presidential debates, and those platforms can really steer the media. Obviously, some of us know this, but when it comes to real estate, steer me to platforms that may not be the best choice, but based on what the choice of those algorithms are going to force me.
Exactly. And so this is why I really like this book. And for anyone who is and she writes it in an approachable manner. I mean, she's so credentialed, so smart. And I heard her speak a couple times, and she's great. Okay. And the thing is that it's really about, we need to start asking questions as real estate professionals. It's on all of us to sort of understand what this, and you succinctly put it, could the recommendations could be wrong. And so ethics comes into play in an interesting way when it comes into this, right? And ethics is part of the NAR code of conduct, right? So we have to look at it this way as well. It's not just in sort of the interaction, it's also now these systems and what does it mean? Yeah,
but I have to argue a second that if ethics and NAR and the whole foundation of being ethical is under our power to adhere to, if we can't control these platforms and it's delivering filtered agenda propaganda, we really can't control that. I'm getting a lot of questions, and I know we have to wrap this up in like 5 minutes for others, but
I know.
So a couple people, can we have I'll get to some of these questions at the end here, but so the question is what are your how do we, if we can't control the filters, we can't control the algorithms, and the information is coming out based on someone's algorithm bias or agenda,
right?
What do we do? What do we as the end user and the business professional do to work with that?
So the short is, this is not that they are. There is the potential, okay? So remember, this has to be very clear. It's not saying that they are. There is a potential, okay? And if you think about it, like how could something as nasty as steering occur?
Sure.
I don't know. Okay.
I 100%.
Right. And so we don't know that. But what happens is because there is a human animal involved with creating these algorithms, we have to look at it. And this is where she talks about in her book, which is so difficult to understand and get to the root cause, is that could come in from a person's inherent bias, even though they don't know it's inherent, right? It's unaware inherent bias. And so, coding that in. So what can we do? Well, I think the first step is to educate ourselves. Read a book like Weapons of Math Destruction. Understand that these issues are what is being talked about behind the scenes. Look at the Center for Humane Technology and see what they're doing, and that would be the first step. In terms of then looking at systems, you have to sort of trust that there's structures in place and entities in place where this kind of conversation is occurring, like RESO.org, right? The Real Estate Standards Organization with Jeremy Crawford putting in great work in terms of working with multiple MLSs and data providers and technology companies and brokers. And this issue, this idea of, I don't know if the specific issue around inherent bias is being discussed specifically within their working groups, but I'm giving a speech at their upcoming conference on this exact issue. I'm doing a synthesis of ethical issues around bias and predictive algorithms. Okay, and so the answer is I don't have an answer, right?
Right. Okay, that's fair.
You have to remain educated, and this is emerging stuff. And that's what also makes it a little frustrating to practitioners who want a concrete answer. It's emerging. And so, we can go quickly to here, right? So some insights, right? We know that there's a fundamental impact on propelling sort of this behavior. So, how do we ethically, and I say exploit purposefully in this standpoint, because to a certain degree, as a word, we are exploiting certain pathways and exacerbate such, right? We're saying, well, how can we do this for consumer benefit and our profitability? If you go to the Center for Humane Technology website, they talk about it, creating more human-centered technology that leverages these pathways in a much more positive way for people and society. Okay, so these unobtrusive structures, right? They create comfortable, self-referential environments. And so how are we to modify and create these that promote these far-reaching benefits? That comes into, have we had, if you get in a working group at anywhere and you say, well, what are the, have we thought about the ethics of this system? Have we thought about what are the decisions that went into creating the algorithm that created the recommendation? And can we interrogate that and understand exactly to make sure that it's proper? Okay. I mean, that would be the first step. The second, and then on this one, we have this sort of collaborative economy, right? And this idea of identity. And consumers will want to have control and rational choice over their data. The question is, when you interact with Facebook and Google, do you own your data? The answer is no.
No.
Right? And so, but more and more consumers want to have control over how that's exploited by them. And so over the next decade or so, we'll probably see a certain bit of rebellion, if you will, or blowback around this idea of, I know it's free and I'm the product, but I'm not willing for that to happen anymore.
Right.
So we'll see what happens. I mean, that's all I can give today on the call, So
all right. So let me try and put a bow on this, because there was so much. And for those who are listening, Eric only had about 10 to 12 minutes on the stage to try and share some of this, which is why I wanted to exploit more of it. I mean, he and I got into conversations that were deeper, and I said, we got to get this packaged a little bit differently. So a couple things I could try and take away. And I do have a few quick questions. Let me get the few quick ones out of the way. What was the name of the TED Talk again? People are asking.
Ellie Pariser is the name of the person giving the TED Talk. Ellie, and his first name is spelled E-L-I.
Okay.
And his second name is Pariser. So Ellie Pariser.
Okay.
And they just type in filter bubble. So if you go to the TED website and you type in Ellie Pariser filter bubble, you'll see it. It's great.
Okay, so let's go back to the beginning a little bit. Let me just try and get a couple recaps that from the real estate mindset, mortgage mindset is we're in an addiction world of dopamine, expecting instant notification. Problem we see there is We have some platforms that don't deliver that immediate gratification,
Yes.
such as email, such as a phone call and a voicemail still, that as you said, people are like, hey, why isn't it ready yet? And you still have 45 minutes of time yet to your due date, but the demand is, I want to know now. So we've got to learn that maybe what we called over communication is now the norm proactively. So for those listening, over communication is no such thing anymore. It's now proactively the norm of what people are expecting. So
I would agree.
Yeah. So waiting for a 24-hour response on an email is probably not going to work so well if that's your normal theme. The consumer mindset and the algorithms are changing what we see, how we see it, and kind of built into a mechanism that's delivering content based on our, would you call it, our needs, our uses,
our preferences. So just like Netflix and Hulu and all this other stuff, we're watching stuff, we're selecting it, and it's learning, and then starts delivering us relevancy, but it's also taking us down a path of where my learning and stuff. So instead of me going to watch something comedic, it's now intriguing me with more stuff that I want to see, that drug effect, and I'm going down that path. And then we've got the challenging it's minimizing any dissonance.
Right.
For what it feels that you would want from a positive standpoint.
Right.
You would view, if you have a pattern of behavior of dark noir sort of, shows, it'll assume, I'm assuming, I don't know the algorithm, but I'm just, it's hypothetical.
Sure. Right.
It will assume that presenting comedic type thing is dissonance, and therefore why even waste your time even for a second?
That's right.
You may like it.
Yeah. And we have to look at it from a real estate perspective. Once we get more into I'll call it the Amazon effect, and here's the way I look at it too. The Amazon effect first took me down a path of a couple clicks and it's purchased and it's at my door in at least in the beginning. Absolutely. 24 to 48 hours. Now it's a one-click purchase to sometimes several-hour delivery.
Yep.
One click, it's purchased, done, and on its way, versus now I've got to click on Zillow or Realtor.com. I've got to wait. I've got to email somebody. I just want the damn answer.
Yep.
And I can't get it because I don't have the Amazon effect yet.
Exactly. And so that's why you're seeing so much work being put into this space around to create this Amazon effect or open door, to have just one click purchase, just take real estate agents out of it, whatever. Well, not out of it.
Well, that's a concern. It is a concern about how do we as humans adapt to it, and does it start to cut out some of our processes? I don't believe so. However, it's going to definitely change. Right. And either we're going to change or something else is going to change. Right.
And so, the view of it is, how do we modify? It's just remember, the consumer is the ultimate disruptor, right?
Right. Yep.
And so some of these platforms are just responding to that segment of consumers that are right now in the mindset of just disrupting. And so when you look at that concept, it's viable. Now, whether or not it challenges the whole industry or not, I don't have the answers to that. I'm just saying that, this is where consumer behavior is going.
All right. So the last I'll just say is, and for those who have questions, keep them coming. You have Eric's contact information. You have mine for sure. Is stop thinking like us as a business. Start thinking more of us from the consumer perspective, how they want it, how we want it, and delivering it in the fashion that the algorithms are delivering it pretty much.
Right.
Really what's driving it, the algorithms. So thank you so much for your time, Eric. This was some overwhelming to some really fascinating. Thanks for studying what you do. I know you're a professor and you got classes to teach and some other cool stuff, but I bet you'll get some great questions out of this.
All right.
Thanks for doing office hours with stuff. Thanks everybody for watching.